All right, so where did we leave off last week?
Genesis.
Genesis.
Did Jacob lose his name to Israel?
That has been done.
So we got past the story of Dinah.
Met his brother.
We talked about Dinah.
Let me see here.
Oh yeah, the raping of Jacob's daughter.
I want to go back to this because I did some additional digging. And I found this very interesting now, and I'm not trying to take away from any of this. Remember this slide?
Uh-huh.
We had some debates.
We had some debates, and I'm not trying to, everything that was debated upon was correct, okay? I think one of them was this Trinity symbol that was brought up. That was a Celtic symbol, and the Christians took it over. Recently, though, Wicca has taken over that symbol for three goddesses.
Which one are you talking?
This one right here.
Wicca?
Wicca, witches,
Right.
have taken that over. Well, I say taken over, they have started using it. And I wanted to say this because just because someone shows this does not necessarily mean they're Christian. Now, so all of these symbols can be not necessarily just Christian, but they, things have been altered in our days. So just be careful as we go along and we see symbols and things along those lines. Because right where we ended it was when Jacob and his household buried all the symbols underneath and all their idols underneath the tree before they were going into the promised land. So they were getting ready. God commanded them to do this. God's in this, and I think that's very important that we make sure. We talked about idols of our own, possibly, that we need to be watchful for. It's not just symbols. It's not just little statues we have in our house, but it's anything that we put before God. Like we said, politics, sports, whatever it may be. Okay, I'm hitting all the things with guys. Okay, could be kids. It could be spouses. Anything before God is considered an idol in our lives. So we need to just kind of be careful, be mindful, ask God to reveal anything in our lives that we are putting before Him. And I think that's probably a good practice to do. I guarantee you He'll answer it. Because it was funny when I was going through this, and I don't remember if I shared it, but I was going through all this and I was looking up, and when we were in Hawaii one year, this guy on the beach was sitting there carving these little tiki men. Well, I didn't think anything of it. I thought it was kind of cool. It's a good little souvenir. Well, those are little gods. And I'm like, I'm gonna have to get rid of my little tiki god. Not that I'm worshiping, not that I'm doing anything with it, but it's probably just not a good idea for me to have something like that sitting in my house.
Did that tiki you off?
And I think it's significant too that he didn't just give it away to somebody else or take it to a resale place or throw it in the trash. He buried it under the ground.
Under the ground.
Yeah.
But current day Israel, they took the hexagram and then they call that as Magen David, Shield of David. It has nothing to do with David in any sense.
Yeah. Well, and we could go back through history on a lot of things that either were pagan that are now Christian, or Christian that once pagan. You could go to Christmas, you could do Easter, you could do all of these things. And I am not saying that it's bad for us to be celebrating Easter and Christmas, by no means. But, we just got to be mindful of some of those things and just watch our hearts. Does that make sense? Okay. So that's where we left off. And so they're about to enter going into the promised land. And so we are at Genesis 35. So let's pull that up. And I think we left off at 2 through 4. So now we're going to pick up at 5 through 7. So actually let's do 5 through 8. Would somebody like to read this one? This is a short one. We don't need Vicky to do this one.
35, yes.
35, yeah, chapter 35, verses 5 through 8. Would somebody like to read it?
I'll read it.
Okay.
Then they set out, and the terror of God fell on the towns all around them, so that no one pursued them. Jacob and all the people with him came to Luz, that is Bethel, in the land of Canaan. There he built an altar, and he called the place El Bethel, because it was there that God revealed himself to him when he was fleeing from his brother. Now Deborah, Rebekah's nurse, died and was buried under the oak outside Bethel. So it was named Alon Bakut.
Bless you.
Thank you.
Okay. What questions or thoughts do you have on this little section? Or insights?
Deborah's name.
That's a weird one. If that didn't make you question some stuff, because a lot of times we'll just like to read past this. Who was Deborah? So
Her nurse.
Rebecca's nurse.
Rebecca's nurse. Why was she named in all this? Why was God putting this in His Word?
She was one of the judges.
Not this one. Not this one. But
Because
yes.
she had the two.
Deborah
Future.
is a judge. Yeah, future, there's a Deborah judge.
She was mother of the tribes, to the men, I believe.
Yeah, so first off, we have no idea really why she was put in here, but that we can kind of glean some things from this. And these are all speculation. We really don't know. Either one, she was really held in high esteem because of who she was and who she was associated with, Rebecca, that for her name to even be mentioned in here. Before we even get to that point, where did she come from? Because they had left Rebecca a long time ago. So at what point did did Deborah even come back into the picture here? Was this after Rebecca died? What point did Deborah come in? Why was she doing this? And then why did they take care of her like they did? Because this whole idea, they buried her where?
Alon Bakut.
Under a tree. What did they just do with the idols?
Under a tree.
Very weird. So why would they bury a person if she was of high esteem under a tree versus a cave like they would normally kind of put some people?
I don't know, Ryan, tell us.
I don't know. No, the only thing that I kind of was getting out of this, do you remember where she was from? She was from Haran,
Yeah.
which was outside of the whole area. So she was this is speculation, we don't know. She was the last person tied to the old ways outside of the promised land with that family. So she was buried before they get in there, before they start going in there. So they were cutting all ties to their previous lineage of outsiders. I don't know this, if that's the case, but it was important enough to God to bring this in here. So maybe they held her to high esteem because of who she was, next to, Rebecca.
So they think it's possible she came when they brought Rebecca to Isaac from that country?
From that country. Mhm. That's a speculation. Yep, absolutely. So that a very interesting story on all this.
Well, Jacob was a mama's boy, and this was his mother's nurse. So this was like a second mother. to
Yeah,
him.
so he was close
for him
to her.
to bury her under a tree either had a significance because, like the idols we were talking about last week, that tree where they were buried under was where Abraham supposedly made the covenant with God. So maybe there was a significance to the tree that's not mentioned, but for him to do this, there had to have been a significant reason, either that God told him to do it and he was obeying, or there was something culturally that we didn't understand because he loved that song.
Yeah.
No doubt he loved it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of significance to the terebinth trees all over Genesis and even beyond.
Yeah, absolutely.
The name apparently means oak of weeping, according to Strong's. So maybe it was a monument to her because she was something special.
Very well could be. I'll take all those. We don't know. Okay. But don't just read over some of these. When you see something that kind of stands out like that, it's like, why was that even in there? Take a little time to dig. Sometimes it's kind of cool, some of the things you might find. Those are little nuggets. Those are little pearls that you might find some pretty interesting things as you start digging. Okay. Now let's go back to 5 and 7. So they were journeying, and God put a terror over the land and all the people, where they were then afraid of doing anything with Jacob. Why do you think that was done?
What did they just do in the previous chapter? Slaughter
Good try.
a whole group of people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's
God was probably protecting them from
Supernatural protection,
Yeah. But if we go back and look at Jacob's life, his whole life has been running in fear. He was running from Esau. He was running from Laban. He was always running in fear of somebody else. Now, everybody now is afraid of him. And he's now entering into the promised land. It's a nice little shift now because we're seeing some kind of a change in him and a change in the ways. His name has already been changed. And so it's kind of neat that he did this. And then he builds an altar to God. Bethel means house of God. And then we'll also see where it says El Bethel, which means God of the house of God. So this whole change with Jacob, it's pretty intense. Okay, we're seeing some really good things starting to come from him now. It's been kind of trickery and things along those lines. Anything else in there that y'all want to cover before we move on?
Well, I think it's interesting that the terror of, what does it say, the terror of God, that somehow the neighborhood, the people around knew that there's something special going on with this guy, that he had God's presence in his life. So, and that's a difference. He's not just a guy with money and a farm and so forth. He's somebody who is apparently walking before God, and they know that.
Yeah. Well, and it does, because they were walking through, and all these other places had their own little gods, and this one they feared, and so that's pretty significant too. So that's a good point.
I read of different people going into different places, even today, where they say that normally you wouldn't be able to go into this place. People don't mess with that person because they know who he is, who they are.
That's good.
I think God also had proven in his last encounter with Esau that Esau couldn't take him, and God was the one providing, and Jacob's been just wrestling this whole time. Like he's always in control, he's always trying to do it his way, and maybe that last encounter, God finally broke him, like we're talking about wrestling with God, and he was like, okay, now you're crippled, so the only way you're gonna come out of this is if I deliver you. And I think he's just had a real change of, okay, I gotta step out of this because I can't do it. And so maybe this is the reflection of how now he's like, let's just go. Because he said when God commanded, he picked up and he went.
Absolutely. No, I think it's great, and it's a great segue to this next section.
I feel like he's born again, almost, kind of like.
Kind of interesting. It's like that was meant to be or something, All right, so let's read 9 through 15. Anybody want to read that one?
I got it.
Okay.
After Jacob returned from Padan Aram, God appeared to him again and blessed him. God said to him, "Your name is Jacob, but you will no longer be called Jacob. Your name will be Israel." So he named him Israel. And God said to him, "I am God Almighty. Be fruitful and increase in numbers. A nation and a community of nations will come from you, and kings will be among your descendants. The land I gave Abraham and Isaac I also give to you, and I will give you this land and your descendants after you." Then God went up from him at the place where he had talked to him. Jacob set up a stone pillar at a place where God talked with him, and he poured a drink of offering on it, and he also poured oil on it. Jacob called this place where God had talked to him Bethel.
Perfect. So God reappears to Jacob, and he reaffirms the covenant. This is the fifth revelation from God to Jacob. And why would God tell him about the name change again? If he'd already done it once, why did he do it a second time?
Maybe he had to remind him of something of their agreement.
Go to the Social Security office. Change
He's still waiting in line, by the way.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it's because we have the short-term memory of a goldfish, which is why we're encouraged to do this stuff all the time. Be reminded.
But there's always, I struggle
how old is
with
he
God
now,
uses the
right?
name Jacob and Israel, alternatively
Interchangeably.
in Psalms. Like sometimes he call sometimes on the same verse he uses both Israel and Jacob.
Yeah, make it a lot more confusing for the reader.
Well, maybe he wanted Israel to be called Israel and not Jacob, like present day. So he renamed it. And if he's the, if he's the founder of Israel, then they called it Israel
Yeah.
instead of Jacob.
Yeah. You know, keep in mind as you go through the Bible, when they do that flip-flopping of names, you kind of need to pay attention to the attitude of the person, of what's going on in their life, as to why they were being called that. Because a lot of times you'll even see this with Jesus, with Simon Peter. When he'll call him Simon, Simon was acting more like what he was back in the day before he changed his name. And when he used Peter, he was acting more like Peter, the rock. You know, same thing with maybe Israel and Jacob and those kind of things. So you start to see an attitude change. Quit being this way, because he was almost kind of reminding them, you're acting like your old ways. Stop it, kind of a deal. You know, I don't disagree at all with what y'all are saying. I think that a lot of that is what you're saying about being reminded of who you are now. Because how often do we have to be reminded? All the time. Okay, you know, and so I don't think that's, you know, that's definitely going on.
Well, it's also how he's holding himself out to others. I'm calling you this, hey, yo. It's like he's saying, come on, you know, you need to be the person I called you to be, and that's different than the person that you were before. So hold yourself out to others, and not as Jacob.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it should be noted that this is the 13th time in the book of Genesis that God has reaffirmed the land covenant. The next one is in Exodus 6. The next one after that's in Psalm 105. But he just reiterates it over and over and over to each generation. I'm going to give you this land forever.
Absolutely. And that's still in today. Okay.
And yet people today say the Jews in Israel are colonial occupiers.
It's crazy, but they have no clue what they're basing that on. So, you know, something else that I thought was interesting that I read was that the first time God changed Israel's name, he was outside the promised land. Now he's inside the promised land, and he reiterates it again. Okay. So maybe it was a change from his old way, because and also he could have been changing it because the last time God changed his name, what was Jacob doing? Wrestling with God. We see a completely different Jacob trusting God, and now he's like saying, I don't want this name to be associated with the old way of you wrestling with me. I want it to be associated with you by your faith and how you've demonstrated that moving forward. Possibly. Don't know. God didn't tell us. Okay, but those are kind of neat little insights that we can possibly pull from here.
Well, aren't we told whenever we go to heaven, we'll have a new name?
We will have a new name. Absolutely.
It also said a second time about reminding him he's going to be fruitful and multiply. And he'd already had all those kids and he was old, even though he was going to have one more. I think I read that it was reminding him that his children will have many children and they will be, you know, reminding him that that's going to keep going on.
Yeah, absolutely. It's good. And then they also used a different name for God right here. I don't know, did y'all catch that? If you ever looked into this, he used the term El Shaddai.
I think you used this with Abraham too.
Yeah, no, he did. Not the first time,
Yeah.
but at this time with him, he's using the term El Shaddai.
Because he reiterates it again in Exodus with Moses. Hey, I know I was known as El Shaddai to your fathers, but to you I'm telling you my name. So he brought in the tetragram.
Yeah.
What does Shaddai mean?
Almighty.
Almighty.
Yeah. What I also think is very interesting, and we briefly talked about this early on in Genesis. We talked about the other little gods, the little G gods, let's put it that way, that are all kind of around in the territories, what everybody worships in their own area. And if we pay attention, they're almost territorial. They have like a certain region that they're kind of over. Well, God has now come into this area and said, this is mine. Guys, y'all are out because this is my territory now. So he's even staking claim on this land as his own, or kind of coming into this kind of deal. So take that and run with it as you want to, but it's kind of neat if we go more to the spiritual realm of what God is doing.
Well, the names, they refer to him in the language where they're talking about him as Elohim, and then he says, I am El Shaddai, I'm God Almighty. So he is saying, wait a minute, you don't have this fully understood yet. I'm bigger than you realize, perhaps.
Absolutely. Okay, so then we've touched on this just briefly, that he goes on and he summarizes the previous revelation to Jacob, and really he has now fulfilled his vow. He's moved back into the land of his father because he said that he was going to do that previously and he hadn't done it yet. So now he has actually fulfilled that vow. That's when he says, put away your toys, your idols, get ready to live here. This is your land. Be fruitful and increase. Then we get to this one little section here, and I had to pause on it because it says, in my version, it says, a nation and an assembly of nations will come from you. What's the significance of that? Does that just kind of just mean, nations and a whole bunch of other people? Yeah, I'll say yes to some degree. Okay. But I think it's even much bigger than that. An assembly of nations. Okay. Some claim that this is really there's two nations. There's the Hebrew nation, which is being built right now with Jacob. Then you have the Gentile nations. That's it. Everything else is kind of multiplied within the Gentile nation. So you have two nations that are going on right now. And then that God has basically separated. Remember the whole separation, division, and everything? You have God's people, and you have everybody else who's the Gentile nations. Okay? So what happens eventually as we read through Scripture, those become blurred. So nations and stuff become nations and multiples of nations and stuff within even the Gentile nations, as we'll find out. Because later on, I don't want to kind of bore you and your eyes glaze over, but at some point, like Ephraim comes into the picture. We'll get to that later. Ephraim is a son of Joseph. Something bad happens with Ephraim, and he basically gets scattered throughout the nations. So the name or the tribe of Ephraim almost becomes scattered outside of the nation of Israel. What's funny is Ezekiel 37, which is a big prophetic chapter, says that Israel and Ephraim will come back into their own land. And he names those two specifically. What we've seen to date, Israel has come back into the nation. What we haven't necessarily seen is Ephraim returning. Although there is chatter now that has been going on for a little while that Israel has now confirmed that the Ephraim nation is alive and well out in the outskirts of Israel, and they are all welcome to bring Ephraim back into the land. So there's going to be a second coming home of Ephraim at some point.
Isn't it Ephraim and Judah?
Oh, Judah. Yeah, Judah, not Israel. Judah. So this is still in the works right now. But the problem is Judah and Ephraim have always been at odds with one another. So that's kind of been the whole sticking point with them coming home right now. It's how is this going to work, kind of a deal. Because what's funny is that's still in play today. Okay, I'm getting too far into the weeds, so let's move on.
Well, the one thing that Fruchtenbaum mentions is when he's talking about the one tribe versus the multitudes, is that he believes it references the 12 tribes.
Yeah.
So it's going to be your singular nation, and then the multitude would be the 12 tribes.
Yeah.
Collapse back into
Thank you.
one.
I did mean to mention that one. So it could just be the 12 tribes, and I completely agree with that. So let's move on. His kings will come from him. He and his kids will receive the land that he promised Abraham and Isaac. So we've already briefly talked about that. So let's move on, 13 through 15. Let me see here. I'll just read this one real quick. Then God went up from him in the place where he had spoken with him, and Jacob set up a pillar in the place where he had spoken with him, a pillar of stone, and he poured out a drink offering on it, also poured oil on it. So Jacob named the place where God had spoken with him Bethel. God left him. He was done speaking. He sets up he memorializes it. He puts a drink offering. He pours oil. He anoints it. And then he's moving on. So let's go 16. Then they journeyed from Bethel, and there was still some distance to go to Ephrath. And Rachel gave birth, and she suffered severely in her labor. Now it happened that when she was in severe labor, the midwife said to her, "Do not fear, for now you have another son." Now it happened as her soul was departing, for she died, that she named him Ben-Oni, for his father called him Benjamin. So Rachel died and was buried on the way to Ephrath, that is Bethlehem. And Jacob set up a pillar over her grave. That is the pillar of Rachel's grave to this day. Then Israel journeyed on and pitched his tent toward the Tower of Eder. So now we have a big event that just occurred to Jacob.
Does anybody know how old she
before.
I did not look into that. No, I did not. I probably should have. But anyway, so she has one more son with him. We'll see more of Benjamin later on. Keep in note here that this whole chapter is not in chronological order with the rest of the book. It kind of moves on forward, where then we're going to kind of back up a little bit and then move a little on, okay? But Benjamin is now born. And in the process, Rachel dies. And they set up a place for him where they buried her. I'm moving on. I'm looking at the wrong notes here. And what's funny is that she calls the son one thing, his dad calls him something else. What did she call him?
Sorrow.
Son of my sorrow. Jacob's like, I ain't calling him that.
Right hand.
I'm going to call him Benjamin. Okay.
Which is interesting, because he was perfectly fine with the other one saying, oh, you're gonna be the one, maybe you'll love me if you'll call me this. And he's like, that's fine.
Yeah, but not this
But
one.
not this one. And this is his favorite wife, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
And she's not alive anymore to argue. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he waited until she was gone. So, son of old age, son of happiness. They buried her, and then they moved on. What's interesting, though, about this is the last time we see Jacob entering Bethel, he received Rachel. Now we're going and they're leaving it, and now he leaves her. He loses her. So that's kind of interesting as he was moving in and out, of these events.
I read about it that to remember that he put a curse on anyone that stole the idols. And she was the one that stole the idols. And so it was fitting that she died during childbirth and wasn't there anymore. That's just
And though she
a
begged for
theory,
children
like,
just before that.
that she was the one that was cursed and he didn't know it because
He didn't ever know.
he didn't know she took it.
The other thing is that I was reading a commentary and they were talking about how, Jacob, being buried in the family tomb was like the thing, right? Like they sojourned, he was gonna go from Egypt all the way back, like, don't leave me here. And so for him not to go 20 miles up the road and bury his favorite wife with the family was a very significant thing. And some people think it was cultural because she died in childbirth. Like back in those days, they basically buried you in the outskirts, and it was a shame, and it was cultural and all that stuff. So that was just another thing they were talking about. There had to be some significance because he would have done anything for her.
Right.
She was the one person that he moved mountains for, and it's for him not just to carry her into the land and bury with the family. There's something there, even though it's not stated what it is.
Yeah.
She was buried where she died.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
on the road to Hebron. It's south of Jerusalem, just a few miles south of Jerusalem. And that picture is an old one. When the Israelis turned the land over to the Palestinians in that area, they had an agreement. The Palestinians would guard all of the sacred sites of Israel. And of course, as soon as they turned it over, they started violating that and desecrating all the sites. And they desecrated that site. So they sent in soldiers and they built a huge wall all around it to protect it. And now if you go to it, you have to hire an armored car. And the car takes you in as close as they can get you, and then you have to run into the building because there's snipers all around that shoot at you. It happened to me last time I was there. And
That's smart tour guide.
that's how well the Palestinians keep agreements.
Yeah. Oh, man, oh man.
Wow.
So
It's a very sacred place to the Jews.
Yeah, absolutely.
Actually, I think there's more significance in the story for Benjamin than there is for his parents. This is a sort of a foreshadowing for Benjamin as well.
In what way?
Benjamin was an interesting character. The tribe of Benjamin was almost wiped out at one point in Judges. Benjamin and Judah had a very interesting relationship. Benjamin resided within Judah. There was a protection that was going on there. So there's some significance to him being called this son of sorrow, and then the name changing that I think points to his future.
Nice. Yeah, we're not going to get to that point. We're not going to go all the way through Judges and stuff. So, What's also interesting, the Tower of Eder is mentioned here. And before I move on, it's a watchtower. It was built to help shepherds protect their flocks from robbers so they could see. That's kind of what they would do. They would kind of get elevated to some degree and watch over. But some believe that it was this tower 1,800 years later where an angel announced to the shepherds
Oh, cool.
the coming Messiah. Yeah, don't know, but it's kind of passed down tradition-wise. So just FYI. All right, let's read on. 22 through 29. Somebody like to read that one? Vicky, will you read that one for us?
While Israel was living in that region, Reuben went in and slept with his father's concubine Bilhah, and Israel heard of it. Jacob had 12 sons, the sons of Leah. Reuben, the firstborn of Jacob, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, and Zebulun. The sons of Rachel, Joseph, and Benjamin. The sons of Rachel, maidservant Bilhah, Dan, and Naphtali. The sons of Leah's maidservant Zilpah, Gad, and Asher. These were the sons of Jacob who were born to him in Padan Aram. Jacob came home to his father Isaac in Mamre near Kiriath Arba, that is Hebron, where Abraham and Isaac had stayed. Isaac lived 180 years. Then he breathed his last and died, and was gathered to his people old and full of years. And his sons Esau and Jacob buried him.
Okay. We have a very weird story here. Okay? What questions do you have on this?
Reuben went in and slept with his father's concubine.
Yeah, basically his stepmother.
A couple of his brothers and mother, yeah.
Yeah, because, so keep in mind who just passed away.
The wife, the favorite wife.
The favorite wife just passed away. So I do believe this was a power play on Reuben's part. He sees this as an opportunity to be elevated. You know, because now he's going to go take on Bilhah and try to become a little higher up than, because they know who's his favorite. Well, Rachel and who?
Joseph.
Joseph. They know that. So this is kind of a way for him to skirt things and go, well, I'm going to go up here and this is what is due me now. I'm going to become better than kind of like my father, and almost replacing him. There was probably a little bit of animosity there with Jacob, also with Reuben, because Jacob has kind of been a little not real assertive, should I say? And so this is a way that Reuben now is going to assert himself and try to become head over things.
He's also taking Bilhah out of play. I mean, you think Jacob's going to go back and it's this whole family dynamic of he's picked and choose this whole time, and now.
Yep, because by him coming over with him, basically it makes her unclean. It's bad. So therefore, anything coming out, he's trying to eliminate some things out of this whole deal.
Well, his father gets even with him.
He does.
Chapter 49, he reads in the Riot Act when he does the blessing.
Yeah, keep in mind.
You are my firstborn, my might, and the beginning of my strength, prominent in dignity and preeminent in power. But uncontrolled as water, you shall not have preeminence, because you went up to your father's bed and you defiled it.
Absolutely.
Boy, he read him right at.
He did. And keep in mind, he didn't do anything now. He waits until later to take care of the things. You know, so he was very patient, and he kept his mouth shut to a lot of degree here. You know, but he does. He gets Reuben. And I think Reuben understands this, because when we get into this next story here, he almost like is trying to fix things a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay? But this was an act of...
birthrights. He lost his birthright and he went to Joseph.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, this whole act, even though we're not told now, it does come to backfire on him in a very big way. But what this also shows is the dysfunctionality of this whole family still.
This is 7 days of our lives.
Yeah, oh my gosh, and we're not even done yet. I mean, this is just, it just shows that the generational acts, have not ventured far. They're being passed down, okay? So, it's kind of ugly.
I wondered about Bilhah. I mean, did she have any say in what Reuben was doing? Or, I mean, we don't know, but she's just used. you know.
Yeah. I can't even imagine. Yeah. What she was going through. 23 through 26, we have the summary of Jacob's family. And then in 27 through 29, we have Jacob moving back home. And then we hear of Isaac's death. So he does come back to his father. When Isaac was 180, he died. He was buried when 49, when we get to chapter 49, we realize he was buried in the cave of Machpelah, which is near Hebron. Now, keep in mind, and I was telling Danny this beforehand, it's really neat, I didn't realize this, but when you do the dates, Isaac was still alive when right when Joseph was being supposedly killed, when his brothers do the horrible thing to him. So Isaac was alive during this whole event. He just doesn't make it to the point of seeing the reunion and everything else that was going on. So Isaac was still going on. That's why I say this isn't necessarily in chronological order, because of the story that we're about to go through. Isaac was still alive during this time. So it's going to kind of jump back and forth. So we see the death of Isaac. Anything else in that chapter before we move on? I think we can get one more chapter. All right, chapter 30. This is a very interesting chapter. We're going to have to probably just read probably all of this. Chapter 36. This is the generations of Esau, which I think is very interesting. You know, before we get into this, why would God put the generations of Esau, which was not the chosen one, why would he put this in here?
Well, they end up, a lot of them are enemies of Israel throughout.
Absolutely. There's a lot of history going on within this family. And as you read through scripture, you're going to come across a lot of names that come right back to this line. So you're going to kind of understand where the family dynamic is. But also keep in mind, Esau is still part of Abraham. That whole blessing of Abraham's family is still going on through Esau.
But he represents the Arab side.
Arab side of things. But God is still blessing them because of Abraham. That's why we have to be very careful on who we hate, not hate, those things, because these Arab nations are still generations of Abraham.
According to Dr. Reagan's calculations, the number of Jews today compared to the number of Arabs is pretty mind-boggling, huh? Absolutely it is.
Which I think is on purpose, because that is going to show the mighty hand of God when he protects them.
Yeah.
Absolutely. All right, let's read these. Let me see. How many verses is it? That's a little long. We may not do all of them. Let's read 1 through 14. Somebody like to read that?
Got a lot of big words in it.
All right, so Vicky, I guess, is going to be the one called on.
I can do it.
Okay.
This is the account of Esau, that is Edom. Esau took his wives from the women of Canaan, Adah, daughter of Elon the Hittite, Oholibamah, daughter of Anah, and granddaughter of Zibeon the Hivite, also Basemath, daughter of Ishmael and sister of Nabiel. Adah bore Eliphaz to Esau, Basemath bore Reuel, and Oholibamah bore Jehush, Jalam, and Korah. These were the sons of Esau who were born to him in Canaan. Esau took his wives and sons and daughters and all the members of his household, as well as his livestock and all his other animals and all the goods he had acquired in Canaan, and moved to a land some distance from his brother Jacob. Their possessions were too great for them to remain together. The land where they were staying could not support them both because of their livestock. So Esau, that is Edom, settled in the hill country of Seir. This is the account of Esau, the father of the Edomites, in the hill country of Seir. These are the sons of Esau's sons. These are the names of Esau's sons: Eliphaz, the son of Esau's wife Adah, and Reuel, the son of Esau's wife Basemath. The sons of Eliphaz: Teman, Omar, Zepho, Gatam, and Kenaz. Esau's son Eliphaz also had a concubine named Timnah, who bore him Amalek. These were grandsons of Esau's wife Adah. The sons of Reuel: Nahath, Zerah, Shammah, and Mizah. These were grandsons of Esau's wife Basemath. The sons of Esau's wife Oholibamah, daughter of Anah, and granddaughter of Zibeon, whom she bore to Esau: Jeush, Jalam, and Korah.
Thank you. That's all.
Good job for you.
You can keep reading if you want.
Understanding all this.
Yeah.
And the font she's reading it is is like size 3 font, by the way.
Right.
Glasses, so I think she's super good.
Yeah. Okay, so what are some things that we're to take away from here? So I put together a little breakdown, so just kind of like with all the kids, the wives, the sons, and the grandkids up here. What are some things that kind of stick out to you as you read this? What are some names that might stick out to you?
Oklahoma.
Oklahoma.
Sounds like
Yeah.
Robin, what are we gonna do with it?
Amalek. Okay, why does Amalek stick out? The Amalekites.
blood licking.
All right, Korah.
Amalek.
And what about, what was the other name for Esau?
Edom.
And who are they?
Edomites.
He was the Edomites.
And
Who rejoiced over the destruction of Jerusalem.
Absolutely.
Right.
So the Edomites, we're going to see a lot of them. We're going to see a lot of the Amalekites. These are all descendants of Esau. These are people against Israel. Okay? We need to remember these because they're all throughout here. And then it even gets more as they go along, and even more other tribes kind of come out. Okay? So I think this is why it's so important that we read this and understand the generations and where tribes are coming from and why they're against them. Okay? Now, we know right now Esau and Jacob are actually friends right now. They kind of, they they're bond, they reconcile. Thank you, that's what I was looking for. To the point, they buried their father together. They even worked out a deal to separate themselves, tribes, because just like previously with Abraham and Lot, they grew too big. Well, now these two have grown too big. And so now they have to separate themselves from one another. And Esau agrees to do this on his own and leave Jacob there. So we know that they actually had a decent relationship whenever they split. Okay?
Where's Judah? That's not his, it was, that's what's interesting to me is that those are not the same names as previously.
Thank you for bringing that up. So previously there was, I think, one name that was changed. I'm trying to remember but there's two different lists, and people will say this is a contradiction. That the first list of Esau's wives are different from the second list. There's all speculation about why this is. Keep in mind that it is not uncommon for people to have multiple names. Okay? So just because they had one name over here, they could have also had another name with a different tribe or whatever the case may be. So the name just easily could have been changed. Some speculate also that one could have died. He could have, he could have married another one. We don't really know. But I tend to lean on the different names of the same person because we see that throughout Scripture. Okay, so to me, that is not a contradiction at all. I didn't put those up here because I didn't know where Judith fit. I think it was it Ada? I don't remember. So don't let anybody tell you anything like that.
that name Basmati means fragrance. That's where you get the name Basmati rice.
Get the what name? What?
Basmati rice.
Oh.
So that means fragrant rice. So
Dirty rice.
Base man? Perfume.
Yeah. What's interesting to hear, though, as we go through this, this is very, very interesting. All of Esau's family were born in the Promised Land, and they were told to get out. All of Jacob's were born outside the Promised Land, I think except for one, and they came into the Promised Land.
Well, that kind of makes sense. I mean, if Esau was supposed to have it and they didn't do their formal agreement and it took all this long until they were finally able to officially or formally say, okay, this is how it's going to be and make their agreement face to face instead of from a slick deal.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I also think it's prophetic.
yeah.
Because we are born outside as Gentiles, but we come into the Promised Land. Okay, so keep in mind all these things. Gentiles coming out, being born out, we're coming in. There's a lot of neat things that are going on. All right, let's read 15. Vicky, I say we. Let Vicky read. Let's do 15 through. Let's see where we can get to. 15 through 30. Let's just do that real quick.
These were the chiefs among Esau's descendants, the sons of Eliphaz, the firstborn of Esau. Chiefs Teman, Omar, Zepho, Kenaz, Korah, Gatam, and Amalek. These were the chiefs descended from Eliphaz and Edom. They were grandsons of Ada. The sons of Esau's son, Reuel, chiefs Nahath, Zerah, Shama, and Mizah. These were the chiefs descended from Reuel and Edom. They were grandsons of Esau's wife, Basemath. The sons of Esau's wife, Oholibamah, chiefs Jeush, Jelam, and Korah. These were the chiefs descended from Esau's wife, Oholibamah, daughter of Anah. These were the sons of Esau, that is Edom, and these were their chiefs. These were the sons of Seir the Horite who were living in the region: Lotan, Shobal, Zibeon, Anah, Dishan, Ezer, and Dishan. These sons of Seir and Edom were Horite chiefs. The sons of Lotan, Hori and Homam. Timnah was Lotan's sister. The sons of Shobal, Alvin, Mananahath, Ebal, Shepho, and Onam. The sons of Zibeon, Aiah and Anah. This is the Anah who discovered the hot springs in the desert while he was grazing the donkeys of his father Zibeon. The children of Anah, Dishon and Oholibamah, daughter of Anah. The sons of Dishon, Hendan, Eshban, Ithran, and Kiran. The sons of Ezer, Bilhan, Zavan, and Akan. The sons of Dishon, Uz, and Aran. These were the Horite chiefs: Lotan, Shobal, Zibeon, Anah, Dishon, Ezer, and Dishan. These were the Horite chiefs according to their divisions in the land of Seir.
Another couple. Oh, well done. Well done. No stuff.
Study those names before you I'm sure it's not accurate, the pronunciation.
You did fantastic. Okay. So why this list? Because this is a little different than the previous list. You know, and I'm going to say this because as we go through Leviticus and things and we get through Numbers, there are lists like nobody's business. Do not skip over them. God put them in His Word for a reason. It's very tempting to go, okay, I'll pick back up here.
I did exactly that thing this morning.
Yeah. I mean, it's very tempting to do that. Take the time to read through. Then you got to figure out, why is He doing this? So what's going on here with all these, this list?
Well, the half hasn't been told, maybe. You know, we may see further uses of these things, that Jews just like to keep records, and they're very thorough about it.
Absolutely.
You never know what's going to happen in the future with these things.
Yeah, absolutely. Archaeology is showing us more and more about the things that are found in our scriptures as being 100% accurate. Okay? So the fact that we have this documented is pretty awesome. Okay?
Well, one thing, if you're back in those times and they had all the oral traditions, like you want to know who's the boss if you run across their land. Like, who am I dealing with, right? What I got to talk to? What's literally the lay of the land here?
Yeah.
And is Judah's, I think Judah took the Timnite women, right? So is that the same people or?
Yeah. I mean, you got to know these things on where they're from. You know, the other thing is he calls them chiefs versus just sons and things. So why the term chief?
They're like princes.
No.
Do they start their own
Village
tribe?
Sarais.
Yeah, that's a good question. Don't know. But what it's believed is it's more of like a political hierarchy within them.
That's what I was going to say. It's just these lists that you talk about coming up in Leviticus and Numbers. It's the repetitive nature of God showing His word, His righteousness.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
It also shows, I mean, He loves every one of these people. You know, they are enemies of His chosen people, but they are listed in God's word. You know, so they're important, and He loves them.
Absolutely, He does. And they're all descendants of Abraham, all of them. The before. You know, and when they split, this is kind of like the area that we're talking about of where they went to. And this, you know, they went more into the desert area, and inside Edom is right. You know, you have Petra, which is kind of cool because then that's where you get the Bedouin tribes. They're all within there. They're all from that lineage, which is pretty cool when you go there. Okay, and I think I threw in some shots that we took when we were there. It's phenomenal what they have done or what they did. I don't even think we could do these things today. Everybody's familiar with this, Indiana Jones. That's small in comparison to this. There's a whole line of them, and there's 7 of them, and they call it the Valley of the Kings. It's unreal. Okay, so These are cave dwellers, but what's interesting is most of these though, they didn't live in them.
They don't even what?
They didn't live in them. They were tombs.
I hope they weren't living in there.
Well, it looks like it goes further in, but it doesn't. There was like a common area, and then there were these little cutouts where they would put the dead.
It wasn't a night back there?
You would think with the heat and stuff, it'd be cooler to live in a cave like that. Why wouldn't they?
Yeah, not in these. So this was kind of like more of a status thing.
Yeah.
If you had a lot of money, you would do this, and it elevated your family, kind of a deal.
The whole place is in a box canyon, and you can only get in it by riding a horse in a very narrow wadi with high walls. There's an amphitheater there too that'll seat about 20,000.
It's phenomenal. And they were actually very ingenious. They did a lot of this because they were hiding. But they had in the walls, when you're walking down this wadi thing, they would have these little runoffs that had these little, for water. And so it's like a little tube. And so the water that would collect on the mountain or on the walls would run down into these tubes, and it all ran down into the area where they lived. So it was their way of collecting water for them.
Did you go as a part of a visit to Israel?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Highly recommend going to this area. It's very interesting.
Not now, but.
Might want to wait a little bit.
Hard, yeah, Rick said it's so hard to get to that it only took about a dozen men to guard it because of the entrance to it.
It's so narrow.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the importance of these genealogies, and they are important. For example, in Matthew, the genealogy of Jesus, you have these women mentioned, Gentiles. I want to just read you one here that shows you how important these are. This was written by Thomas Fuller, a 17th century pastor in England. And he wrote this: Rehoboam begat Abijah, that is, a bad father begat a bad son. Abijah begat Asa, that is, a bad father, a good son. Asa begat Jehoshaphat, that is, a good father, a good son. Jehoshaphat begat Joram, that is, a good father, a bad son. I see, Lord, from this, that my father's piety cannot be handed on. That is bad news for me. But I also see that actual impiety is not always hereditary, and that is good news for my son.
Nice. That is great. So do not look past these. It's very important. Okay, let's finish the chapter. And we'll stop with this chapter because I have something else to talk about. Vicki, you want to read 31 through 43?
These were the kings who reigned in Edom before any Israelite king reigned. Bela, son of Beor, became king of Edom. His city was named Dinhabath. When Bela died, Jobab, son of Zorah from Bozrah, succeeded him as king. When Jobab died, Husham from the land of the Temanites succeeded him as king. When Husham died, Hadad, son of Bedad, who defeated Midian in the country of Moab, succeeded him as king. His city was named Avith. When Hadad died, Samiah from Masrekah succeeded him as king. When Samiah died, Shaul from Rehoboth on the river succeeded him as king. When Shaul died, Baal-Hanan, son of Akbor, succeeded him as king. When Baal-Hanan, son of Akbor, died, Hadad succeeded him as king. His city was named Pau, and his wife's name was Mehetabel, daughter of Matred, the daughter of Mizahaba. These were the chiefs descended from Esau by name, according to their clans and regions: Timnah, Alva, Jephthah, Oholibamah, Elah, Kenan, Kenaz, Teman, Mibzar, Magdiel, and Eram. These were the chiefs of Edom, according to their settlements in the land they occupied. This was Esau, the father of the Edomites.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate you doing the whole chapter. So again, I think this is further proof of God's blessings on Esau, because he has kings, and it just kind of comes down the line that God was actually blessing Esau, even though what was going on. There was a couple things that I found that I really wanted to point out. If we go back and look at 38 and 39, verses 38 and 39, there is a person by the name of Baal-Hanan. So this shows us how far they have fallen from Yahweh, because he took on the name Baal. Okay, so don't skip by these. This is why these are little clues to show you what direction they were going. Because back in the Middle East, it was not uncommon for them to take on the name of the God that they were worshiping.
Akbar, was it Allah Akbar? When I saw that, as a made me think of
Yeah, and Allah, yeah. And I mean, they're calling on the name of their God.
And I think like in the name Bozrah is something like similar to the one that is mentioned in Revelation 12, right? Israel is going to seek refuge in Bozrah in the end times.
Yeah.
These are like perfect places.
Absolutely. You know, and it's funny, and they don't even have to go to Petra to flee. Because when we were going through there, we were driving through the Dead Sea, because you have the Dead Sea kind of on the left, and you're kind of going through, and you could just look off to the right, and you can see nothing but just caves. You can just point caves. There are places for them to go run to outside, and that's on their land too. They don't even have to go out, but it's possible they could come here. Absolutely, but who knows?
It's amazing that Israeli scribes wrote all these down. I mean, these were their semi-enemies or their definite enemies, and yet they were very careful to write all these down.
Yeah, Moses was very careful in all this, and and he wanted to make sure all this was taken in, because what I find very interesting, and we'll get to this in a second, Moses, let's do it now. Pull up Deuteronomy 23. You know when somebody gets there. We're going to look at verses 7 and 8. Whoever has it, read it. Go ahead.
Do not abhor an Edomite, for he is your brother. Do not abhor an Egyptian, because you lived as an alien in his country. The third generation of children born to them may enter the assembly of the Lord.
What did he say?
Don't hate an Edomite.
Don't hate an Edomite. This was from Moses.
But David writes a psalm, upon Edom I cast my sandals.
Why would Moses, though, write this?
Because the third generation of children born to them may enter the assembly of the Lord.
They were family. Moses understood this. That's something that we need to understand. All of these generations that we're listing here, they are all family. What we're seeing is a huge family feud going on. What we're seeing in Israel right now is a family feud that's happening. Keep that in mind. It's very hard for us to grasp that. You know, we tend to think as families as those that are really close to us, our immediate ones. How many of us really know our third cousins removed on our father's side? We don't know that side of the family. And we don't really consider them family. We're like, okay, they have our name. They look at generations and areas as a family unit. So that's why Moses was like, look, this is our family. Don't hate them. We are not to hate them either.
Which makes it like, so that's why I was talking to Robert a minute ago, that same thing about that family feud. If you don't know that, it just makes it so much more in depth to know what's going on in Israel right now, that you know that was two brothers fighting against each other back then, and it's a big, long family feud, and they are so steeped in their traditions and customs that you can see why that family feud is still going on today. But the depth of that, if you don't know anything about the Bible, you wouldn't know anything about all of this, and you would just see it superficially as what's going on today.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
It has so much more meaning.
I mean, it's hard to imagine what's going on, that everybody fighting over there today, they have either Ishmael or Esau's blood within them.
Right.
I mean, I know they're mixed, don't get me wrong, but those lines are there, and they're fighting one another. So it's a family feud that's happening.
And it's pretty common growing up in an Arab community. I'd meet people all the time, they'd say, oh yeah, they're family, and they were 3-4 times removed.
Robert said it's the Hatfield boys.
It's very common. There's Middle East and Asian countries.
Yeah.
The major fight happens among the brothers. They go to the court and...
Yeah, I was fighting with my brother yesterday.
Well, something to also keep in, because I think this is very interesting, that the time frame that we're reading this and what's going on over there right now. What's happening over there right now is historic in nature, because it's always been going on. But we also need to keep in mind it's spiritual too. Okay? No amount of peace treaty by the UN, by the US, is going to bring peace in that area. None. The sheer fact that there's people out there saying, we need to bring peace to Palestine, and all this for Palestine. Okay, let's say that we did do that and we create an entire place for them, which we've done in the past, by the way, and say, this is now your, let's say we give it to a portion of Israel to them. Let's split it in half. Let's give it to the Palestinians. That is not enough for them to stay put and make peace. They will continue moving on, and this term, from the river to the sea, means an entire, taken out Israel as a nation and not wanting one survival. That means eliminating an entire race. What's funny to me is the people who are protesting, not wanting an entire nation to be demolished, is wanting an entire nation to be demolished. They're going completely against what they're saying.
Most of them knowing what they're saying.
Yeah, they don't. They don't. And I'm,
the river or the sea.
Yeah, and I'm not getting political. This
Which
is.
side of the river?
Yeah, exactly. Which one are we talking? But what I'm trying to say is this whole fight, the only time peace will come in is when?
That's why when you pray for the peace of Jerusalem, you're praying for the return of Jesus.
Return of Jesus.
And Antichrist will bring it. What do you
Partially.
mean Antichrist? Partial. And he'll backstab it in the middle of the year. 3.5 years, right?
Yeah, and this is why it's important for us to know the end, the revelation and stuff, because all of this is prophetic. So the things that we're seeing today are not going to do anything to do any good until Yeshua comes back. Okay? So do not let all these peace talks confuse you. It's not going to happen in any way, shape, or form.
I did a couple of workshops over in UAE, and I would have people come in from the Middle East countries. And I was told by my sponsor, we bring in guest retired executives, and he said, make sure none of your guest executives have Jewish lineage. It sent chills up my spine. Just the unknown person that might come in, they would not abide with them attending this conference.
Wow.
You went to Israel, did they take you to the back door of Jordan? Because when we went, they had a specific place where only Americans.
Like where you crossed?
Where you crossed, and they wouldn't stamp your passport because they didn't want to show when we left that we had been to Israel.
No.
It was a protection for the Americans.
No.
They didn't actually
they-
stamp our passports.
They give you a little slip piece of paper now.
Yeah, we do have the piece of paper
and they
now.
didn't tell us to keep that.
But-
And there were a few people on our tour who nearly didn't get out.
Yeah, and that was probably the scariest. Now, we didn't come back into Israel because we left out of Jordan.
We did the opposite.
Yeah,
We
okay.
went through Jordan and went back in, but we had to revert out of we flew out of Jordan as well, and so we had to re-enter that country.
Oh.
And they
To
said that,
Amman?
huh?
To Amman?
Uh-huh.
Jordan?
Yeah, and they said if we had had that, we would have.
Yeah, it's flight
Had a
crew
little
for
bit of
years. We would carry 2 passports, one for Israel, one for the rest of the Middle East.
Wow. That was probably the scariest part of our entire trip, honestly, was going across that border. But it really wasn't horrible. The last thing I want to say, and then we'll close with some prayer requests. As for Christians, this is a time of testing for us. Who are you going to back? Hopefully that's it. Because we need to realize, who was Jesus? He was a Jew, was he not? That our Messiah, Jesus, is a Jew. We are supposed to be called to be praying for the Jews, supporting the Jews. Now, I'm not saying you support every action that they do, and I'm not condoning that. But I am saying, though, that you pray for them and that they are part of us. We are grafted into them. Okay? So this is a time of testing. You know, God is not one to be lukewarm. God does not want someone to be in the middle. Well, I kind of support Pakistan or Palestine. I kind of support Israel. I want to be right here and I want to sing Kumbaya. God has drawn a line and saying, who are you going to support? Because we even get a picture in Revelation what he says about someone in who's lukewarm.
Ryan, and there's a wonderful scripture in Romans 11. Romans 11:16 or 26, around there, that says, those who've been cut off, he's able to graft in again. And we're waiting for him to come back and graft in these people who don't know that or maybe totally against him. He can graft them in again.
Absolutely. So God does not tolerate neutrality. Okay, there is no gray area with God. Salvation, there is no gray area with God. So we know God is not sitting there, straddling the middle. So it's time for you to choose a side, and we'll go from there.